Hello, and welcome to another edition of What's the Plan? What's the Plan is a new public access TV show which brings the community leaders of our town and towns around us to the table to discuss their views, their solutions, their plans for addressing the many issues that come before us. Today, I'm very happy to have my good friend and colleague, Chairman Matthew Muratori of the Board of Selectmen, with us to discuss his vision and his plan for addressing the short and long-term issues facing the town of Plymouth today. Hi, Matt. How are you?
How you doing, Mark? Thanks for having me.
This is going to be a battle of FaceTime.
Yeah, I know. Huh? It's a push.
It's a push. It is definitely a push here. Absolutely.
I'm doing a show next week. So.
Well, if you want to even the score.
Yeah.
Matt, you and I have discussed this overriding topic forever, since we've been working together. And I want to get your viewpoints on, and I'm going to ask a very, very global question. It may be the only question I ask for the day, because I think we could probably go on indefinitely. But as the titular head of the town, chairman of the Board of Selectmen, you and I both know that chairs have the ability to direct where a debate or a discussion goes and how certain things are addressed and the priorities. What do you see as the current chairman of the Board of Selectmen as the major short-term and long-term issues that Plymouth has to address? And then the second part of that question, and I apologize for the complexity, but what are your plans to address them?
Well, I think they're all intertwined. You have the 400th anniversary that's coming up, so it's pushing a lot of agendas. It's pushing, where we're going to develop the downtown area, the waterfront area, other parts of the community. It's really taking a hard look at the budget and fixed costs, and how we're going to address those before we hit 2020, and looking at how do we expand on tourism as well. Not just up to 2020, before 2020, but beyond 2020 as well. So I think we're in a good position now here in 2014, looking at the 400th anniversary, looking at infrastructure that we're looking at doing, looking at planning for the downtown. We just recently had a discussion about the 1820 courthouse area, which I thought was a really good discussion about the center and the heart of downtown and what that could actually be. I think that could lead to further development in the downtown area, probably the waterfront area. I would love to see the waterfront begin to be developed over the next couple of years. Sort of like a Marina Bay and Quincy, but maybe not to that extreme, but something on that line. And of course the Cottage Park area as well is another area that now the economy is getting better. We're hearing signs that may be developed as well, which is a beautiful waterfront area in North Plymouth. So I see us as a community working together to try to develop in smart areas, the downtown, North Plymouth, and maybe still the village areas as well, which would then help us with the revenues in the budget that could help resolve some of the, or help, not maybe resolve, but maybe help eliminate some of the bigger issues we're having with fixed costs and other things in the town budget.
It's interesting you centered your discussion here on the waterfront, which I think is an invaluable resource. Mm-hmm. But as you know, my business is environmental consulting and environmental permitting. And we have spoken for years about developing the waterfront. And there are critical limitations to what we can do by statute, state statute, not so much local statute, but environmental statute that exists on the board, on the books today. How do we go about dealing with this? For example, I've consulted at some level with the Cordage, and the Cordage needs to put some sort of breakwater, if you will, in to protect the marina. Nobody's going to put a valuable yacht on a pier that has an open gateway to the North Atlantic, which we do. I mean, it faces northeast, right out to the Bug Light and on to Europe. Environmental permitting doesn't allow that. Have we engaged the delegation Have we engaged the state in looking at the possibility, because it's going to have to be waivers or allowances or variances to laws to get this. And I think back to the blame that was placed when Ocean Spray wanted to expand on the waterfront, but their expansion required solid fill in the harbor, which I don't care who was a selectman at that time, the state was not going to allow. I know that because it's my job, it's my profession. Have we talked to the delegation at all?
I think in a very small basis, but I think it's something that needs to rise to the top of the chart now. We really need to start having that serious discussion with the delegation over the next couple of years on how to actually do that. Because I think it's vital for not just Plymouth, but for the whole South Shore, Cape Cod, the whole Commonwealth, to develop the shorelines that we have, and maybe not just in Plymouth, but Duxbury and Situate as well. So we do have to have those conversations, and it may not just, like I said, be with Plymouth. We may need to get together with other towns and get the delegations from not just Plymouth, but other communities as well together.
Well, the 400th, I think, is a Plymouth celebration. But it's not only a Plymouth celebration.
That's correct.
It is a Plymouth County celebration. It is a Commonwealth celebration. It is a national celebration. For those who don't know, I spend a lot of time on the Cape. And there are plenty of monuments from Provincetown to Eastham about Pilgrim, early Pilgrim, I mean the first weeks of Pilgrim, not settlements, landings, if you will, on our shoreline. And as much as what happens to Plymouth, and I know Plymouth and Provincetown have kind of butted heads over who gets credit for what with the Pilgrims, but I think it's an encompassing celebration, and because of that, I think it is, as you said, the 400th is driving many things. I think the 400 helps to drive that discussion with the delegation. And you know, I said the delegation. We shouldn't limit it to the delegation. That delegation should also include our federal representation, whether it be Senate, whether it be House, because you can get waivers from the state regs, but there are national regs. There's, you know, the Clean Water Act and things of that nature. So a lot of that is, I think, very important.
Yeah, absolutely, because the 400th anniversary, as you said, is driving the whole discussion. So it's the eyes of not just the Commonwealth of the United States, but the world are going to be on us. So that's how you're going to get the attention of the federal delegations and all the state delegations, the governor, et cetera, over the next couple of years to say, oh, maybe we should be doing something with this coastline and these towns to really help out, and because it's going to help tourism throughout the whole Commonwealth, not just Plymouth.
Well, my suggestion to you on the waterfront, if I could, and I made this suggestion to many people, and I know it's come to the surface and is getting a little air. A comprehensive harbor plan has to be developed in this town.
I agree.
Because if you have the comprehensive harbor plan, you then have the ability to gain the waivers, the variances, the allowances that we would need. Right now, we have, in my opinion, a ton of data, and we got to get it organized.
Put it together as a plan.
And I know David Gould, the Director of Marine and Environmental Affairs, is working towards that. But I think he should get all the support he needs to make that happen, because once that happens, and I think it's just the writing of the report, it's not going out and collecting the data. I think once he gets the support to be able to do that, I think then the dominoes start falling with regard to the harbor and the waterfront that we would like to see. Right now, my sense is, from the regulatory standpoint, that Plymouth wants a lot, but they haven't told us how they're going to implement it, how they're going to direct it. If we give them this, what is the protection? What is the offset? Which everything is quid pro quo right now. You get this, what are we getting? You do that, what protections are you going to have? So I think that's very important.
It's a good question. That's a great point, because I think the town manager and myself, I think it was Melissa Riga at the time when I first became chair, met with a developer from another state who actually was interested in the waterfront and maybe developing it, and really asked about, do we have a plan for that yet? So it's a great point that we really need to start with that, and then we can work our way out.
And we look at other harbors, and there are harbor master plans for other harbors, and I don't just mean Boston, Fall River, New Bedford. I'm talking about Nantucket. I'm talking about other communities, Gloucester, where you have a waterfront that's part of or a driving force in the economics of the community. It's just not a thing to go look at. It is an engine. It drives certain things. So I think it's very, very important. And I think Plymouth Harbor and Plymouth Bay, I mean, they're two different things, is one of those locations that need this.
Great idea.
Moving on, I mean, obviously 400th driving certain things, but we still live here. Whether there's a 400th or not, the residents of Plymouth, 59,000, whatever it is now, 56,000, or the number keeps jumping. What do you see that we need beyond the extras that we get from the celebratory nature of the 400th? What do we need? What issues are we confronting in your eyes?
Well, I think...
Or more of what are the priority issues that we're confronting?
Well, I think the priorities overall in the town that we're confronted with, and it all relates back to the 400th, but also to the budget as well, is really the nuclear power plant too, and what's going to be happening in that area. As we know, they did get a 20-year license a couple of years ago, but will they be open for 20 years? We don't know. There will be an end game at some point, but we really need to start planning for now. What happens when that shuts down, and what happens in and around that area too? There's a lot of acreage around that area. Should that land be developed around that area to create some more housing in that area? Should it be developed for something else? So I think that's a key area of the town. I also think we need to continue to looking at the villages in the state. I mean, in the town. You know, the Cedarville area, the Manomet has done a great job in their neck of the woods of developing that whole area. Cedarville's starting to do that, and I think we need to continue to help develop the North Plymouth and maybe West Plymouth and help with that as well, because I think in again helping with the budget issues going forward as a community is growing, we need to look at smart development and how do we control that development, but don't lose the beauty of the town with a lot of open space we have, et cetera.
Well, it's that economic environmental balance
Exactly.
that we have to do. One of the issues that I see from a land use planning perspective, and we're speaking more globally, not just land use, but obviously you sat for a time on the Industrial Lands Committee and with me, and we know that access, visibility to major thoroughfares is key to bringing in those big developers. I mean, nuclear power plants like to be away from everybody and on the shoreline for obvious reasons. And if the nuclear power plant should shut down, the only thing that really replaces the nuclear power plant at that location, by definition, from what we understand, is another power plant. So again, we're now looking at offsetting their tax base with other tax base, and I'm almost not sure that the land that's available in Manomet or in Cedarville is accessible enough to the byways and highways of the town to make them really attractive. We talk about, and we discussed this in the Industrial Lands Committee, where the airport is a phenomenal layout of land zoned for industrial use. It happens to be 15 minutes from anything. Nobody wants to go there. It becomes a niche industry that goes in there. And I think given our layout, the town layout, 44-3, really running the north and the eastern perimeter of the town, we are kind of limited as to what we can and can't do. How do we address that?
Well, I think when you just mentioned 44, I think that 44 road has opened up a lot more, particularly for West Plymouth. I think the more we can promote Plymouth over the next few years, coming to the 400th anniversary.
You love that
the
400th.
more, I'm telling you, it's a key.
That's fine. That's great.
I think it's a key to a lot of things.
I think a lot of people need to understand the significance of that event.
It will bring more people to the Plymouth area, and when they see the different parts, and you talk about West Plymouth, it's a great area. I just opened a daycare in West Plymouth on South Meadow Road.
I know you did.
It's phenomenal. It's a great area of town. town. And I think you'll get more people that, as you said, niche areas, that niche businesses that they can actually put into those areas of town. But I think they're out there. I think some of the visible ones, like we just talked about, Paragon Outlets going behind Home Depot. I mean, that's something that it's right up. We're fortunate to be right off a highway. You know, that would be good in that area. It's already commercial in that area, anyways. Being seen right off the highway. That's why they want to come here. Is because of the location and the name of Plymouth and what Plymouth stands for and where Plymouth is going over the next 6, 10, 15, 20 years.
How does the Board of Selectmen, as the policy, the executive branch, the policy heads of the town, how does the Board of Selectmen affect the kind of change that's required? And I think part of that is zoning. We are a town that has very not compatible zones necessarily butting up to each other at all times. And I realize that's a land use question for Lee Hartman, who is going to be a guest in the near future. But from a policy standpoint, I mean, when you go back to the charter, both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board have the same language to work towards economic development. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. So both boards are working. How does the Board of Selectmen help to exert that change?
Well, I think what we need to do more of, and which we have just started doing over the last couple of years, is working in conjunction with the Planning Board more, so that we're somewhat getting on the same page together. I know one thing that we are now looking at now is a full review of all the zoning bylaws we have in town, and over the next, I believe it's the next year, the consultant will be coming back to the Planning Board, us, to make some recommendations of how we can streamline some of the zoning laws we have, for better or for worse. And I don't think it's making a judgment of what they are. It's just how to make it better, how to be more business friendly to people coming in. And that it doesn't mean just allowing everyone to build everywhere. It's just how do you look at streamlining the processes better. And I'm looking forward to that report coming back in the next year to see how that is going to help the process.
Well, there are several things happening. Obviously, the zoning bylaw review and potential revision, and I think there will be some amendments to it and changing it and cleaning it up a little bit. But we have site plan review, site design conditions, which a lot of people are reacting, oh, they're putting up barriers. No, the planning board's not. This is speaking to the goals that I think we all talk about of balancing economic growth with environmental, I don't want to say environmental protection, but environmental conscious. But it also speaks to healthy communities, which we all signed on to. We sat, we listened to Peter Holden, and we all nodded and said these were great ideas. Well, once you do that, you got to put pen to paper, and you have to start thinking about things. And I think that if somebody really wants to come to Plymouth, as you said, Plymouth means something to them, they're going to work with Plymouth. I think if somebody wants to come to Plymouth because there's just a spot to drop, and well, if that's not easy, I'll go someplace else. I think we need to evaluate the benefits and the costs of that. I'm not saying all of those individuals are necessarily a bad thing, but Plymouth, I think, has a brand. We don't want to accept that we have a brand, but we do have a brand.
We do.
When you say Plymouth, Massachusetts, and in the intro of the site design, we talk about this. We talk about when I say San Antonio, Texas, or I say St. Augustine, Florida, or I say Nantucket, or I say New York City, a picture crops up in somebody's heads. New Orleans, the same thing. And I think the same thing happens with Plymouth.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to be true to that. And not just in little historic districts, but everywhere. And I think we've had some success at that. I think we've had developers who have worked with us, but we've also had some very, very exploitive potentials come in here, and we have to work with them, and I think we need to be more upfront with them. Guys, you want to be here, we'd love to have you, but this is what we want. I don't think it should be the third continued hearing of a zoning board or a planning board or somebody telling them, no, we want this, we want that. They should have a sense walking in, and that's honesty.
Yeah, that's right.
And you and I have talked about this in the past. It's communication.
Absolutely.
Know what you're dealing with. Don't change the rules midstream. That is
Exactly.
absolutely not fair to anybody. It's not fair to the officials. It's not fair to the developers.
Absolutely. And you know, I think what's going to help with that as well, as you know, Dennis Hanks has recently left the chamber and was also the economic director for the town. But we as a board have at least decided that, you know what, it's worth to have a full-time position of that. So we're working with the economic development group, and we voted unanimously to actually fund the position, a full-time position for the town that will work under the foundation. And I think having that person full-time will probably help that process through. So when developers do come to town, they are given that upfront conversation, that honest conversation. These are things you're going to have to do, and we'll help you walk through that. It will help you through that. And I think you're right. One thing we can't do, once we give them the rule book, we can't be changing the rules in the midstream.
That's right.
Because we can't deal with emotion. And you and I have talked about this before as well.
Governance by emotion.
There's some folks, you know, that deal by, you know, that run their boards or are on these committees that run with emotion. And you have to learn to take that out. It's a hard thing to do, particularly if it's something in your backyard. But you've got to be able to balance that emotional part of in my backyard to what's the reality of what's happening, and are they following the rules and the regulations that were given to them ahead of time.
No, that's true, and it's interesting you say that, because we were talking about energy. We were talking about the nuke a little while ago, but in this whole spirit of alternative energy, everybody loves alternative energy until it's next door to them.
In their backyard.
And that's the buzzword of today. But I go a step further. I say that energy generation is a dirty business, and I don't mean dirty in the sense that it pollutes, although some of them do, but I mean dirty business in that nobody really likes it. Nobody wants a coal-fired plant next to them. Nobody wants an oil-fired plant. Nobody wants a wind turbine. Nobody wants a solar field. So nobody wants those facilities next to them, but they want them, whether they want to admit it or not, because their energy, or all of our, I mean, I'm not, this is the pot calling the kettle black. We all are adding to our energy consumption. And in the past 30, 40 years, we have not built a whole lot of new generation facilities.
No.
So, and we don't like the brownouts, we don't like the blackouts, but we don't want the new facility over there.
Right, exactly.
And it's very interesting.
Solar is catching on now more so. I see a lot of people now talking solar. People who were talking wind turbines 2 or 3 years ago, those same people, you know what, maybe they're not the best thing. Maybe we'll look at solar now.
Well, it's interesting because I was watching, you talk about needing a life. I was scanning through television a couple of nights ago, and I don't remember what town it was. I want to think it was in the South Coast area. They were actually talking about solar energy overlay districts where they confine them. So again, it's a whole issue, like we're going to put them over there, And one of the interesting things, you talk about planning and you talk about proactivity, and I think that the town should look at the feasibility. I said feasibility, folks. I said we shouldn't do it because I don't know if it's going to work necessarily, but we have a big ocean. We have semi-diurnal tides, which means we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day. And it isn't going away. And we have a 70-foot channel, plus or minus, at the Bug Light. Tidal energy. You don't see it.
That's a great idea.
And I brought somebody down. This was, I think, before you were on the Board of Selectmen. I brought a friend down who actually graduated college with me, who is a vice president. His company has changed names many times through acquisition and merger and this and that, so I can't tell you who he works for right now. But he is their vice president in charge of tidal energy, and he came over. We met with some selectmen, we met with the planning board, and some of the energy committee was there. This is several years back. We rolled out the nav chart of Plymouth, the Plymouth shoreline. He pointed right at the Bug Light.
Wow.
He said, this spot and the canal, and the canal we're talking about, where Mass Maritime is talking about doing pilot studies down there, where you have water coming and going. You have impellers spinning. Now, there are environmental impacts associated with that, but it's something that the town should look at. If we're really trying to be green, be sustainable, there are other options besides, and I get it, some people don't like big wind turbines. I don't mind them. I've got power line towers near my house. If you don't like them, you plant a tree and it'll grow. But I mean, I get the arguments of visible aesthetics. And we had the same arguments with cell towers too.
Sure. I'm sure they did when street lights, street poles are
absolutely,
coming up too. I think the same thing happened back then too.
It's our nature to deal with change,
right?
Change of what we know. But I think tidal, T-I-D-A-L, not title, has real potential, especially in a town like Plymouth, where we have a natural. We don't have to dredge. We don't have to do a darn thing. We have to get it permitted, obviously, and there's got to be feasibility work to see if it actually would work. But there is a potential for dual impellers.
Interesting. I'm actually on. I talked earlier about the show that I have today in Plymouth on PAC TV. I'm actually going to be doing taping in another week or so with the energy officer, Patrick Farah, and we're going to talk about energy and what we've done and what can we do. I'll be sure to bring that up.
Patrick's doing a good job because obviously he works with the planning board in the planning department, but. You know, he's the one who really confronts change on almost the issue of change on a daily basis. He makes a lot of excellent arguments that fail in the popularity, arena, so to speak. And so it's very, very interesting. So we have to do that. We're getting close to closing here. This has been great. I mean, you and I could sit here for another 3 hours
Absolutely,
and talk about this, and we do. One of the things that, and I want to thank you and I want to thank your predecessor, Bill Hallisey, for keeping the lines of communication open between the planning board, the Board of Selectmen, and the school committee. I think those three boards are, I know redevelopment board is elected and so on and so forth, but the school committee, the planning board, and the school committee, and the Board of Selectmen, excuse me, are the three boards, the three elected boards that are in public view an awful lot. And I think it's really important, and I experienced the benefit of that communication, and I would hope that that translated to you. I know Dennis enjoys those meetings. I'm no longer the chair, so I'm not a part of them. But
Paul joins us now.
Paul joins us, and I know that's continued, and I would hope it did because there was a discussion once, and they said, "Well, you're doing it. When you go away, will it still be done?" And my answer was, it should be done. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about Dennis. It's about three chairs working together. And I think you agree with my premise.
Absolutely. Every 2 or 3 months, Dennis Bagley, the chair of the school committee, and Paul McCall, the chair of the planning board, and I will get together and just have breakfast, have lunch, just kind of catch up what's going on. And that's how we all kind of stay on the same page and try to work together. We don't agree on everything, but that's okay as long as we're on the same page. No, we never did, but that's okay. It's how do we continue to move the town forward.
And I think it gives you an opportunity to be aware.
Exactly.
So you're not blindsided. I always said, when I had originally brought this up with the planning board and Billy, I said, it's not really fun when we do our work on Monday night, you do your work on Tuesday night, and on Wednesday I read about the fight we're having in the OCM, which I get the OCM, that's their job. They're supposed to report what's going on, and they're doing that. There's got to be a place where at least you're aware ahead of time, what we're doing, and we know what your spin is. So at least when Wednesday comes out, I know I'm going to read an article about conflict, compromise, or agreement. And I think that's what we owe the citizenry.
Sure. That's what they elect us for.
That's what they elect us for. They didn't elect us to like each other. They didn't elect us to. They didn't elect us to agree. They elected us to work together for the betterment of the town and the betterment of them. And I think that, bringing it back to planning, I think advanced planning doesn't answer all the questions, but it does allow us to strategize on how we're going to attempt to answer those questions in a positive manner.
Absolutely.
Well, my friend, I thank you
very much for having me.
It's a pleasure to always chat with you.
Always a pleasure.
I look forward to maybe having you on again.
Sure. Anytime.
So this concludes this episode, our third episode of What's the Plan. I'd like to thank Matt Muratori for sitting in with me as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and we look forward to having you view our future episodes and learn more about what your community leaders are trying to accomplish and their strategies for making Plymouth a better place to live. Thank you.